Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Wisteria here. This fairy tale is called The Farmer and the Badger, and it's a Japanese fairy tale. Long, long ago, in the distant country of Japan, there lived an old farmer and his wife, who had made their home in the mountains. Far from any town, their only neighbour was a bad and malicious badger. This badger used to come out every night, whether moonlit or dark, and run across to the farmer's field and spoil the vegetables and the rice, which the farmer spent his time carefully cultivating. The badger at last grew so ruthless in his mischievous work and did so much harm everywhere on this farm that the good-natured farmer could not stand it any longer. And determined he was to put a stop to it. So he lay in wait, day after day and night after night, with a big club, hoping to catch the badger, but all in vain. Then he laid traps for the wicked animal. The farmer's trouble and patience was rewarded, for one fine day, on going about his rounds, he found the badger caught in a hole he had dug and disguised for that purpose. The farmer was delighted at having caught his enemy, and carried him home securely bound with rope. When he reached the house, the farmer said to his wife, "I have at last caught the bad badger. You must keep an eye on him while I am out at work, and not let him escape, because I want to get my revenge on him and have hot badger soup for supper tonight." Saying this, he hung the badger up to the rafters of his storehouse and went out to his work in the fields. The badger was in great distress, for he did not at all like the idea of being made into soup that night, and he thought and thought for a long time, trying to hit upon some plan which he might escape. It was hard to think clearly in his uncomfortable position, though, for he had been hung upside down very near him at the entrance to the storehouse, looking out towards the green fields and trees and the pleasant sunshine, stood the farmer's old wife, pounding barley with a huge wooden pestle. She looked tired and old. Her face seemed many wrinkles upon it, and was as brown as leather. And every now and then, the badger was sure she peeped right at him. And it was every time that she stopped to wipe perspiration which rolled down her face. As the badger watched her, a wicked plan formed in his mind. "Dear lady," said the wily badger, "you must be very wary doing such heavy work in your old age. Won't you let me do that for you? My arms are very strong, and I could relieve you for a little while." "Thank you for your kindness," said the old woman, "but I cannot let you do this work for me, because I must not untie you, for you might escape if I did, and my husband would be very angry if he came home and found you gone." Now, the badger is one of the most cunning of animals, and he said again in a very sad, gentle voice, "You are very unkind. You might untie me, for I promise not to try to escape. If you are afraid of your husband, I will let you bind me again before his return, when I have finished pounding the barley. I am so tired and sore, tied up like this. If you would only let me down for just a few minutes, I would indeed be very thankful." The older lady, well, she did have a good and a simple nature, and could not think badly of anybody. Much less did she think that the badger was only deceiving her in order to get away. She felt sorry, too, for the animal as she turned to look at him. Black and white, bristly creature looked in such a sad plight, hanging downwards from the ceiling by his legs, which were all tied together so tightly that the rope and the knots were cutting into the skin. So in the kindness of her heart, and believing the creature's promise that he would not run away, she untied the rope and let the badger down. The old woman then gave him the big heavy pestle and told him to do the work for a short time while she rested. He took the solid piece of wood, but instead of doing the work, as he had told her, the badger at once sprang upon the old woman and knocked her down with it. He then killed her, cut her up, and made soup of her in her own kitchen. But even then, the bad badger didn't escape to freedom. Oh no, 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 no. He was more wicked than that. Instead, he stayed and waited. He was waiting on the return of the old farmer. The old man worked hard in the fields all day, and as he worked, he thought with pleasure that no more now would his labour be spoiled by the destruction that the badger created. Towards sunset, he left his work and turned to go home. He was very, very tired, but he was thinking of his nice supper of hot badger soup awaiting his return. This cheered him up. The thought that the badger might get free and take revenge on the poor old woman never once came into his mind. He also never imagined that the badger knew magic, but of course he did. And while the man was tramping home, the badger used his dark arts to take on the old woman's shape. As soon as he saw the old farmer approaching, he came out to greet him on the veranda of the little house, saying, "So you've come back at last. I've made the badger soup. I've been waiting for you for a long time." The old farmer quickly took off the straw sandals and sat down before his tiny dinner tray. The innocent man never even dreamed that this could be his wife and not the badger that he was eating up like a soup. Then the badger suddenly transformed himself back to his natural form and cried out, "You wife-eating old man, look out for the bones in the kitchen." Laughing loudly and scornfully, he escaped out of the house and ran away to his den on the hills. The old man was left behind alone. He was stunned into silence. He could hardly believe what had happened or occurred within his own home, his own house. What happened to his own wife? For a badger? As true realisation did kick in, and he did realise all that happened, and the actual truth did actually sink in, he was so scared and so horrified that he fainted right away. After a while, though, he came round and burst into tears. He cried loudly and bitterly. He rocked himself to and fro in his hopeless grief. It seemed too terrible to be real, that his faithful old wife had been killed and cooked by the badger while he was working quietly in the fields, knowing nothing of what was going on at home, and congratulating himself on having once and for all got rid of the wicked animal who had so often spoiled the fields. And oh, the horrible thought he had very nearly drunk the soup which the creature had made of his poor old woman. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. He wailed aloud, clutching at himself and shaking his head in horror. Now, not far away, there lived in the same mountain a kind, good-natured old rabbit. He heard the old man crying and sobbing, and at once set out to see what was the matter, and if there was anything he could do. He wanted to help his neighbour. So they sat down, and the old man told him all that had happened. When the rabbit heard the story, he was very, very angry at the wicked and deceitful badger, and told the old man to leave everything to him, and he would avenge his wife's death. The farmer was at last comforted, and, wiping away his tears, thanked the rabbit for his goodness in coming to him to his distress. The rabbit, seeing that the farmer was growing calmer, went back to his home to lay his plans for the punishment of the badger, for he was also very wise, as well as very kind. The next day, the weather was fine, and the rabbit went out to find the badger. The evil creature was not to be seen in the woods, or on the hillside, or in the fields anywhere. So the rabbit went to his den, and found the badger hiding there. Despite his dark magic powers, the animal had been afraid to show himself ever since he had escaped from the farmer's house, for fear of the old man's wrath. The rabbit called out, "Why are you not out on such a beautiful day? Come out with me, and we will go and cut grass on the hills together, my friend." The badger, never doubting the gentle rabbit, who was his friend, willingly consented to go out with him, only too glad to get away from the neighbourhood of the farmer in the fear of meeting him or being trapped once again. The rabbit led the way miles from their homes, out on the hills where the grass grew tall and thick and sweet. They both set to work to cut down as much as they could carry. They wanted to take it home, store it for the winter. When they had each cut down all that they wanted, they tied it in bundles and then started homewards, each carrying his bundle of grass on his back. This time, the rabbit made the badger go first. When they had gone a little way, the rabbit took out a flint and steel and, striking it over the badger's back as he stopped along in front, set his bundle of grass on fire. The badger heard the flint striking and asked, "What is that noise?" "Crack, crack." "Oh, that is nothing," replied the rabbit. "I only said crack, crack, because this mountain is called Crackling Mountain." The fire soon spread, though, through the bundle of dry grass on the badger's back. The badger, hearing the crackle of the burning grass, asked, "What is that?" "Now we've come to the burning mountain," answered the rabbit. By this time the bundle was nearly burned out, and all the hair had been burned off the badger's back. He now knew what had happened by the smell of smoke of the burning grass. Screaming with pain, the badger ran so fast as he could to his hole. The rabbit followed and found him lying on his bed, groaning with pain. "What an unlucky fellow you are," said the rabbit. "I can't imagine how this happened. I will bring you some medicine, which will heal your back very quickly." The rabbit went away, glad and smiling to think that the punishment upon the rabbit had already begun. He hopped about from the badger's den, but he did hope that the badger would die of his burns, for he felt that nothing could be too bad for the animal who was guilty of murdering a poor helpless old woman who had trusted him. He went home and did make an ointment by mixing some sauce and red pepper together. He carried this to the badger, but before putting it on his burns, he told him that it would cause great pain, but that he must bear it patiently, because it was a wonderful medicine for burns and scalds, and it would heal such wounds. The badger thanked him and begged him to apply it at once, but no language can describe the agony of the badger as soon as the red pepper had been pasted all over his own back. He rolled over and over and howled loudly. The rabbit, looking on, felt that the farmer's wife was beginning to be avenged. The badger was in bed for about a month, but at last, in spite of the red pepper application, the burns healed and he got well. When the rabbit saw that the badger was getting well, he thought of another plan by which he could compass the creature's death. So, he went out one day to pay the badger a visit and to congratulate him on his recovery. During the conversation, the rabbit mentioned that he was going fishing and described how pleasant fishing was. More so when the weather was fine, as it is, because the sea was smooth. The badger listened with pleasure to the rabbit's account of the way he passed his time now, and forgot all about his pains and the month's illness, and thought what fun it would be if he could go fishing. Yes, so he asked the rabbit if he would take him the next time he went fishing. This was just what the rabbit wanted, so he agreed. Then he went home and built 2 boats, one of wood, the other of clay. At last they both were finished, and as the rabbit stood and looked at his work, he felt that all his trouble would be well rewarded if the plan succeeded, and he could manage to kill the wicked badger now. The day came when the rabbit had arranged to take the badger fishing. He kept the wooden boat for himself and gave the badger the clay boat. The badger, who knew nothing about boats, was delighted with the new boat and thought how kind it was of the rabbit to give it to him. They both got into their little boats and set out. After going out some distance, and some great distance it was from the shore, the rabbit proposed that they should try their boats and see which one could go the quickest. The badger fell in with the proposal, and they both set to work. So now they were going to see whose was the fastest. They took their oars and went as fast as they could for some time. In the middle of the race, the badger found his boat going to pieces, for the water now began to soften the clay. He cried out in great fear to the rabbit for help. But the rabbit answered that he was avenging the old woman's murder, and that this had been his intention all along, and that he was happy to think that the badger at last had met his just deserts for all his evil crimes, and was to drown with no help, not one person to help him. Then he raised his oar and struck at the badger with all his strength, till he felt that he was sinking with the clay boat. Thus, at last, he kept the promise to the old farmer. The rabbit now turned and rowed homewards, and having landed and pulled his boat upon the beach, hurried back to tell the old farmer everything, and how the badger, his enemy, had been killed. The old farmer thanked him with tears in his eyes. He said that till now he could never sleep at night, nor be at peace in daytime, thinking of how his wife's death was unrevenged. But from this time he would be able to sleep and eat as he could before. He begged the rabbit to stay with him and share his home. So from this day, the rabbit went to stay with the old farmer, and they both lived together as good friends till the end of their days. The end. And that is The Farmer and the Badger. That's a really odd story. The wording's very odd. I've had to change a few words because, well, to be fair, I don't understand the other words very much. But not just that. Some of them are sort of scratched out, so I can't see them because they're worn down with age, as they do. But yeah, very interesting story indeed. I did not expect that from a badger, I'll be honest. Creepy. Thank you for listening. please hit that like, share if you can, and if you've not yet subscribed, please consider doing so. Many blessings.